friend close to the king said, it can be done tidily or it can be done untidily, getting rid of Andrew from Royal Lodge. It can be done with grace and dignity, or it can be forced upon him. So this is sort of fighting talk, because Charles is paying a lot of money to have him stay there.
So Kate, D-Day, why do we think it has been such a pivotal point in the royal diary that we know Charles was so determined to make it over there, despite what's going on with his health?
It's the kind of first big international event, isn't it, of his reign that he's been able to take part in. And, you know, as we know, we've both written, and I've written again this week, that he's been working towards this with his medical team to try to be there at this kind of historic moment. I think he realises that these are the things that people remember from a monarch. The way that you act, the things that you say, these speeches live on. They're not the kind of just 5 minutes or 10 minutes on the stage. These are the things that go down in the history books. These are the way, these words are the words by which he will be judged, not just now, but in generations to come. And it's also it's so poignant this year, of course, isn't it? Because it's the 80th anniversary, which means, as Charles said yesterday at Portsmouth, where we were both at that event, he said that the number of veterans still alive today, of course, are tragically dwindling, was the way he put it, which is true. And it's the last time that as any monarch would be able to thank them in person. There was a brilliant point that one of the veterans had fibbed about his age to be able to sign up underage. He was just 15 when he went out to war. So, but you would have to really have fibbed about your age quite a lot to still be here for the 85th or the 90th anniversary. I mean, it's just not possible. So this is so important to him, I think, and his reign, and what he feels is his kind of family and his stately duty to be there and say the right thing.
Do you think, I agree with all of that, and I sort of got the sense that his determination to be there in both Portsmouth and Normandy, he has, as you're saying, an eye on legacy in terms of what is going to be left behind for the veterans, for the families, but also in terms of the royal involvement. And I was struck by his speech, where he was one of his speeches where he was talking about the fact that he'd been able to, it was in Normandy, at Versailles, he'd been to 7 D-Day commemorative events previously, and he was reminding, I think, both the public and the veterans that that is such an integral part of it, and he was there again at the big one. And I suppose it's all about continuity as well, isn't it? It is all about the big set piece moments where you have the King with the Queen, and both in Portsmouth and in Normandy, the Prince of Wales, playing very important roles in both, making speeches at both events, but also, almost there, not by his father's side, but, very prominent at events. And it's also, those set piece moments are also messaging. They're very strong about messaging, and it's showing the public and the international stage, I'm the king, but this is the future too.
And I think that's what he does really well, is that he casts back and forward. We constantly see this in his speeches. So he's casting back to King George VI. Today he talked about the generations as yet unborn who will owe this, will owe a debt to the men who died on D-Day and the subsequent battle for Normandy. And I think that's something that he does really well. I mean, he's been quite poetic to kind of summon up the horrors and the fear and the bravery of the day. And I think that's coming across more in his speeches as well, that he's becoming more himself. And of course we see the things that he's really interested in coming across, this idea of unity. He referenced yesterday that 30 nations joined together as part of those allied forces to help with the D-Day landings, the success of which ultimately became the beginning of the end of the war. And he spoke about his, multi-faiths, faiths coming together. Which is, he talks about this a lot. We know that it's part of what he wants to achieve and what he's always interested in, bringing different faiths together. And he mentioned that those in 1944 had been honoured to have served who were of Sikh, Hindu and Muslim faiths as well. So he's doing the kind of the official head of state thing, but he's bringing in his own elements. He's got something to say. And I think this is why this D-Day is very important to him. He's got something to say. He's got a world stage on which to say it. And he doesn't know how much time. Well, none of us know how much time we've got left, but he's determined to get that message across.
I was very struck on exactly that point. He's on the world stage and there are things that he wants to say. I was very struck by something in his speech in Normandy today where, we've talked a lot about how the royal family must be above politics. They've got to be very careful about the public statements they make, not just now during the general election period, but generally all year round. Mm-hmm. But there was one line at the top of his speech.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Well, it was him saying, "We recall the lesson that comes to us again and again across the decades. Free nations must stand together to oppose tyranny."
Absolutely.
And of course, Russia was not invited to the commemorations in Normandy.
No.
So to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people, to other heads of state who were there, that is him making a point that we are once again at a point where war has come to Europe, and the king with subtle but very important messaging like that is making the point that all the allies are together again, standing shoulder to shoulder, but this is also going on in our backyard.
That's a line that stood out for me as well. I have to say, it just sort of jumped right out at me because, of course, it was 2014, if you remember, when he was having what he thought, as then Prince of Wales, was an unguarded conversation with somebody, and it was the time when Russia had started its annexation of Crimea, and he said to somebody, of course, Putin's doing now what Hitler did then. And that at the time was
exploded.
It did explode. The Kremlin said it was outrageous, that he should be intervening in politics like that. But we know where he stands on a lot of this stuff, in the way that the late Queen kind of was very, very. We've seldom heard what she thought about different world leaders and different countries and geopolitical incursions. Whereas with Charles, he's made that. We already know. We already know what he thinks. So for him, he now has that kind of platform. He may as well say it, and he is saying it. And I think that's really important. So it wasn't just a day for the king, because it was a huge moment for the Prince of Wales as well. I mean, what did you make, Roya, on his involvement yesterday in Portsmouth, today in Normandy? How do you think he came across?
I think for William, who enjoys doing anything that celebrates and commemorates and pays tribute to the military, he's in his element. So whether it was in Portsmouth yesterday, as we saw meeting all the veterans, you could see how much he loved being with them, and the Wrens as well, and talking about Catherine's grandmother working at Bletchley, but really the way he was sort of holding the hands of the veterans. But he enjoys, I think, being on that stage and making those kind of speeches, knowing that a global stage is seeing him pay tribute to the military. And
I think he does now. I think he's much better at it now.
He's much better at it now. He also, it also harks back to his military service, where, it was, of course, members of the royal family, it's almost sort of part of their DNA that they serve in the military. But it was always said to me that, he was determined, and both he and Harry wanted to do their military service, because whenever they did events to do with the military, they wanted to be able to look at soldiers,
somebody in the eye,
and say,
"I know,
I played my part.
Yeah.
I sort of served my time." So, I think all of that I think he's very. That brings out the best in him. I think there's something about I think Charles is very alive to the fact that it is only a good thing for him to have William there on those big set piece moments. He's the boss, but always with one eye on the future and showing everyone on the global stage that that's what's coming.
And I think both Charles and William know that when they speak, it's only going to work if they're, to use an oft-repeated phrase of the young generation, their authentic selves. People are only going to believe what they're saying if it's genuinely what they think. And that's what Charles is doing. That's what William's doing. And I think it's interesting to see that happening. It's not just taking a kind of cookie cutter speech. It's making it personal to them. It's what they believe in. It's what they're passionate about. And it makes the speech better.
I have to just say that, I thought the set pieces looked great. And, I think the royal family pulled it off very well with Charles and Camilla and William doing their thing in Portsmouth and in Normandy. I cannot help but reflect on the fact that there is a bit of a hole there. And would it have been nice to have seen Prince Harry that under completely different circumstances? Of course, he's no longer a working royal, so he can't be doing the official engagements. But I can't help but think, Prince Harry, who served 2 tours of Afghanistan, did a decade in the military, served his then queen and country. Of course, circumstances are very different now. But do we think it's a bit of a shame that he is now no longer on those, with his brother and his father talking to the veterans? He was so good at that.
Over 2 days of commemorative events, there was definitely a role for Harry, wasn't there? No. On this 80th D-Day anniversary, there was definitely a space for Harry, Duke of Sussex.
Do you think he?
And
do you
he
think
wasn't
he's?
there.
Do you think he is in slightly wistful in Montecito this week?
I would love to know what he makes of all this, because it must be so hard to watch from the outside. I mean, it's his own doing. It's his choice to walk away. I'd love to know. Harry, come on the show. There was an obvious space for him. There was so much going on, and he would have done it well. I had a piece in the Times magazine in which I revealed a lot of the work that I've been doing over several weeks. But essentially, in a nutshell, to save you reading the 3,400 words, if you haven't already.
Oh, I read every word.
The King wants him out of Royal Lodge.
Good luck with that, Charles.
Andrew doesn't want to go.
Nothing new there.
The King says, I'm paying your way. If you don't go, I'm going to possibly cut your money off.
Dig more around your patch and turf you out.
Andrew says, I've got a lease. So legally, I'm allowed to stay.
Yep.
Other people say that lease is only good if you're prepared to carry out the repair work, which is stipulated in there. He's got to do the internal decoration every 7 years. I've seen the lease. It says he's got to do the internal decoration every 7 years, the external decoration every 5 years, and that's coming up this year and last year. There's been pictures published of buildings seemingly in disrepair, paint peeling off walls and all that sort of thing. Now, what's so interesting is just how fraught the relations have got between the brothers that have got to this stage.
Oh, sounds familiar.
A source said, well, exactly. We'll talk about that, because I think we think about Harry and William falling out, but this is very, very bitter now between Andrew and the King. And the more I looked into this, like I said about people saying it was the siege of Royal Lodge, the language is so inflammatory that I was shocked, to be honest, because somebody said to me, a friend close to the King said, it can be done tidily or it can be done untidily, getting rid of Andrew from Royal Lodge. It can be done with grace and dignity, or it can be forced upon him. So this is sort of fighting talk, because Charles is paying a lot of money to have him stay there, his security, his allowance.
Do you think he'll do it, though? Do you actually think the King will boot him out of Royal Lodge?
I think he's hoping that it won't get to that stage, because Andrew will leave.
But it's at that stage, isn't it? The fact that the King's people close to the King are talking to you with that kind of language, and that the King clearly wants that out there in the public domain.
Well, I don't know if he wants it out there in the public domain, but
don't you think? I think people close to the King speak like that when they're happy for it to be out there, and that's not done against the bosses.
Well, that's what I think highlighted the kind of difficulties of our job. To me, Roya, this week, and I know you find it the same, is that it's so hard getting people who know what they're talking about to talk to us.
Yeah.
That so often we can't say who those people are because we're protecting our sources. And that has layers of complexity. So it means that we, the editor has to trust me that what I'm telling him is right. It also means that the readers have to trust when they read a source said quote that I'm telling them the truth as well, that, it's not rubbish. And more importantly for me, I suppose, is that the source has to trust me themselves. I mean, we're a long way away from the days when, treachery days when they would be sent to the Tower, but there is a real risk of people talking to you and revealing things that perhaps, others wouldn't want revealed, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I think that's the story, and for me, revealed a lot of that, but it's sort of digging behind it and how it's all going to work, because of course this was all supposed to be solved before the Queen died. I mean, I was told
one of the loose ends she didn't manage to tie up.
Yeah, so
or maybe she didn't. Clearly Andrew didn't want her to tie it up.
Well, she was quite fond of him, wasn't she? I mean, there's been a
bit of a blind spot, I think he was for her, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But to go back to the question, sorry, that was an interesting digression. Do you genuinely think Charles will boot him out? Because I just wonder. All the fighting talk, I think, definitely reflects what he wants to happen. I think Charles is probably also quite alive to the fact that if he was seen to boot out Andrew, admittedly, there's a very good place for him. He can go and live at Frogmore Cottage.
Which is the plan, yes. as I've written in the
He
piece.
lives with Fergie. She's been going through her own cancer battle. She's doing well as part of her recovery. But, you know, do you think he's concerned about the look of older brother and the king booting out the spare who has really, you know, fallen on hard times. He hasn't fallen on hard times, but has not had the best few years, I think, is a fair thing to say.
Well, his own doing.
Absolutely his own doing.
But no, the answer, I think, to your question is yes. I do think the king will get him out. And the reason for that is because there's a bigger issue at stake. It's how money is spent. So Andrew pays, you know, a nominal rent to the Crown estate, which is independently run property portfolio whose profits go back to the Treasury. Now, from that pot of money, that's where the money comes to fund the royal family.
Yeah.
Charles has said he's going to reduce the money he takes from 25% of that to 12%. He's very, very conscious of money, how it's spent. He's very conscious that the royal family needs to be seen to be good value for money. Royal Lodge is all now privately funded because the king is paying from his own private pockets, not public money. It's not your money, my money.
Yeah.
To fund Andrew there, 3 million plus a year in security to keep him there because it's outside the Windsor security cordon for Windsor Castle. But also he's giving him an allowance which is well in excess of £1 million a year, just his living, so he can, you know, carry it.
It's quite good pocket money, isn't it?
It's pretty good pocket money. But it's not just about the fact, you know, meanie king. It's about his whole reign and what he wants to be seen and known for. He doesn't want there to be waste. We know that. He doesn't want food waste. He doesn't want any kind of waste. Well, Fergie could be the kind of the bridge between them because she does get on really well with Charles. It's hoped that she might speak some sense into him. And she said in a previous interview, you know, I don't presume to call Royal Lodge my home. I'm lucky enough to live there. So she's had very kind of a soft approach to the whole subject of staying in Royal Lodge. But interestingly, someone close to the king said that he's really happy to keep paying, you know, for her, to help keep her life comfortable. It's not about kind of cutting her off either. So, but Frogmore Cottage, very nice place. Harry and Meghan did it up beautifully. We saw inside it with the Netflix drama. There are pendant lights, beautiful kitchen that was put in by Meghan, all very tasteful. I'm sure.
Do you think that's Andrew and Fergie's taste?
But it'll be nicely done up, won't it?
And of course, this weekend, over 2 days, on Friday and Saturday, it is, drumroll, the Duke of Westminster's wedding. Hugh Grosvenor to Olivia Henson. And of course, we've written a fair amount about this, Kate, haven't we? And we've talked a lot about it in previous episodes.
Let's keep doing it because it's wonderful. Everyone loves a wedding, Roya.
My big, fat, very English wedding at Chester Cathedral, £10 billion. What does £10 billion buy you? It's going to be a jolly big wedding at Chester Cathedral. And then a private reception later on Friday, and then another smaller private reception on Saturday. But we predict a lot of the coverage is going to focus on who's not there. Who's not there, Kate?
It's Harry.
It's Harry again.
He's
another
not
whole.
there. But William's going to be an usher.
As exclusively revealed by
you, Roya.
Sunday Times.
Good scoop.
Is that hard for you to say, Kate?
Not at all. It was a very good scoop. Speaking of scoops, actually, the Duke of Westminster is paying to give away free ice cream for people who rock up in Chester, not his guests.
Is it sustainably sourced?
It will be.
I know Olivia is very
into
into sustainable food.
It's sad, isn't it? Because he's not. You know, there's so many kind of mutual. It's like a strange divorce, isn't it, Harry and William? That, you know, the friends have to pick friends, and then they have to decide which kind of social engagements to go to. And William's here, and he's the future king, so he's always going to kind of rise to the top, I would thought.
You'd have thunk.
Oh dear.
Anyway, good luck to and best wishes to Hugh and Olivia on their special day.
Indeed.
So, Kate, we often talk about why it's important for the public to see members of the royal family out and about around the UK on away days, in all four corners, unveiling plaques, opening hospitals.
But this week, we saw them on the international stage. often we would see the presence of the late Queen on so many of those important kind of set-piece events, but now we have the King and Queen at these commemorations, and Prince of Wales, of course, standing shoulder to shoulder with the elected world leaders.
I think there's a point here to be made about our place on the world stage. And I remember when I came to write a obituary piece for the Sunday Times magazine of the late Queen, someone very close to her said to me, she was very proud that for a small nation and an island, the UK throughout her reign had kept its place on the world stage and had sort of punched above its weight for being a small nation. And we're almost sort of seeing that, we see that continued with what the King and Queen and the Prince of Wales and other members of the royal family, Princess Royal was in Normandy too, are doing on the international stage, and seeing and hearing from people like President Macron what it means to other countries that they're there and making the effort.
Yes, continued in a new way, isn't it? Because there's so much kind of sensitivity around any reference to any kind of form of colonialisation of old or any kind of undue force exerted on other countries. But that kind of convening power that we talk about often, that the king wishes to develop, this idea of unity, showing William with the Canadians, that building up the Commonwealth, building up this idea of a kind of a family of nations that the Queen loved. She was so proud of the Commonwealth as a kind of community of countries that all had common goals, and using that as a kind of vehicle for world peace, really. And in a kind of increasingly kind of fractious and divided Europe, I think that the king is very cautious of that and very conscious of that to do that. But it's always interesting, because it's only when they go abroad and do these big set pieces that you actually see the reaction from other countries. And we always thought when the late Queen was still with us, what happens when she passes away? Will the king still have this kind of reverence from world leaders? And you can see from Emmanuel Macron today in Normandy that he does. There is still this, oh my goodness, it's the king and queen. So they still have that kind of set appeal. There's a Madame Macron tried to grab her hand at one point, sort of hold Camilla's hand, which was slightly odd. But
a new entente cordiale.
A new entente cordiale.
Her close.
Yeah.
Well, let's end with the words of the king. The stories of courage, resilience, and solidarity cannot fail to move us, to inspire us, and remind us of what we owe.
Goodbye, Roya.
Bye, Kate.